Welcome to Rathalos Watch. Today I am going to be talking about Balahara and how I initially thought it would be a boring monster, but after spending over 60 hours in the Monster Hunter Wilds open beta, it actually turned out to be pretty amazing in my opinion. This will not be a full monster fight rating video with an in-depth breakdown. That is saved for when the game launches on February 28th, 2025. Instead, I'll be sharing my initial impressions of the monster, the weapons I used to fight it, and what I've liked and disliked about it so far. All the footage you see here is captured on PC at native 4K and 60 FPS with no AI assistance or frame generation. Enjoy the uncompromised quality. If you're looking forward to Monster Hunter Wilds coverage or just Monster Hunter in general, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on. And don't forget to join our Discord community. Link is in a pinned comment. Without further ado, let's begin. Before we dive into the praise for Balahara, I want to start with a bit of a backstory about my initial thoughts when Balahara was first showcased in the second gameplay trailer at Summer's Games Fest this past June. The first thing you should know is that I'm not generally a big fan of serpent-like monsters or anything resembling a worm or oversized snakes. It's not that I think these types of monsters are bad, they just don't appeal to me visually. It's similar to how some people prefer sci-fi over fantasy. You all know I tend to gravitate toward monsters that look more like dinosaurs or fanged beasts, such as Rajang or Kangalala. So just by the looks, Balahara was already becoming my least favorite monster based on the visual design alone. However, all of that changed when I finally got to fight him for the first time in the Monster Hunter Wilds open beta. Believe it or not, I actually had a complete blast fighting him, and I couldn't really figure out why at first. Mind you, I fought him with a variety of weapons including hammer, longsword, heavy bowgun, lance, and even the switch axe. So I got to experience the fight from multiple angles and perspectives, both melee and ranged, with a wide variety of different playstyles. Now I know some people don't like this monster. Actually, quite a few people don't, based on what I heard from the community. Many say that he moves too much and is overly wiggly and can be a pain for some melee users. I'll have to agree with this sentiment, but only to a certain extent, and I will explain further in the video. But if you think about it in actuality, he is indeed a sandworm that goes in and out of sand, and he will be wiggling because that's just how worms are in real life. So it makes sense for him to be that way. My fastest kill time with Balahara was 7 minutes and 34 seconds using a hammer solo. And if you ask me personally, I believe using a hammer against him is one of the more challenging weapons for a wide variety of reasons. For one, sometimes he keeps his head up high, and two, he just moves his head in many different directions, and most of the time, it can be a bit hard to predict where it's going to be. Believe it or not, I kind of enjoyed the challenge. The best way to use a hammer is to constantly hit the head, and with Balahara, it's more difficult than with other monsters such as Doshiguma, Chalcabra, or even Raidao. Their head most of the time is always low to the ground, and they don't tend to move it up as high, nor do they wiggle. I believe that this is one of the reasons why people don't really like Balahara that much. Another reason would be the fact that he does a lot of tail swipes, and he throws up a ton of his mucus around. He has one move where he turns his head almost 180 degrees and is able to spit behind him. This is the one move that usually catches me off guard when I'm trying to chop his tail off with a long sword or any other sharp cutting weapon. I've also heard people complain that his sand pits are annoying to deal with. I'll have to disagree with this completely. The sand pits make him an interesting monster and give him a unique trait. Not only can you get sucked into it, but other monsters as well, and I find that very interesting. If you feel that you're about to get trapped inside, then just immediately call upon your sacred and get away. It really isn't that hard to escape. I don't understand why people have issues with it. Your sacred will literally save you. If you are a melee user and have a really hard time fighting him using the melee weapons, then I highly suggest you switch to any of the ranged weapons. Balahara has a long body, and both his head and tail are his weak spots. You can cut the tail off even with a slicing ammo if you are using a heavy bowgun. If you feel that he is moving too much, then you can just spam him with sleep arrows until he falls asleep, and then switch to like a greatsword and perform a TCS on his head or tail while he's asleep. The sleep stays long enough for you to switch weapons over, so you can easily utilize the melee and range combination of your weapons. Another reason why I love fighting Balahara is because he's one of the few monsters who has 3 wound spots that you can create when you are mounted on top of him. He has one on his head, middle of the back, and the far back near the tail. It is very satisfying to create all of these wound spots and then break them. You can deal just a stupid amount of damage in a single mounting phase. There are so many ways to fight this monster and counter him. I'm not sure why so many people don't like him. If you are getting hit a lot, then just switch to lance and block all of his mucus, head, and tail swipes. One of my most favorite moves that Balahara performs is the one where he propels himself forward using his lengthy tail. First of all, it looks hilarious and it's quite awesome. That is probably his most devastating move that most people find annoying. I personally don't mind it. After a few hunts, you'll start to realize early on when he's about to do it, and you can easily just dodge it or block it. Honestly, just like most monsters, I believe that Balahara just requires a bit more practice when it comes to fighting him. Whenever the second demo hits or when the game comes out, I highly recommend you just practice with a wider variety of weapons until you get to the point where reading him becomes like a second nature. I won't lie, fighting him for the first time can be a bit daunting, but in all all honesty, he isn't as bad as most people think he is, in my opinion. He just takes a bit more patience and focus than someone like Chotacabra or Doshiguma. Honestly, Chotacabra is in a league of his own, and comparing him is just silly. Chotacabra is a tutorial learning monster, so the only monsters you should be comparing Balahara to are Doshiguma and Rathalos. Last but not least, another reason why I like Balahara is because he is not a snooze fest when it comes to his combat speed. He is not too slow, but not too fast either. He moves just enough and with the right speed to where he keeps you on your toes. Some people think he is too quick, but I personally do not mind. The pacing of the combat in Monster Hunter Wilds also feels much more fluid and a bit quicker than Monster Hunter World, and I believe that Balahara fits the pacing perfectly. The reality is that everyone has different playstyles. Some people prefer more fast-moving monsters or slower, depending on how the hunter himself adapts and plays and what weapons he or she uses. It's near impossible to make every monster likable for every existing individual out there, but that is the beautiful thing about Monster Hunter as a franchise. There's always a monster that someone likes or dislikes. In a nutshell, I found Balahara to be far more of a good surprise than I thought he was going to be. He is fun to fight, and I think I enjoy fighting him with the lance the most. There's something very satisfying about poking him in his ugly face with your long stick. Okay, that sounded rather wrong, but you guys get what I mean. I promise I still prefer to poke my stick into Gemma, even though it's not as long as I would have liked, but that's besides the point. Please don't make fun of me in the comments. Anyways, don't sleep on the Balahara. It's a solid monster, and I think you need to give it another chance. Try a different weapon, or if you are having too much trouble, go for something like a bow or heavy bowgun. Oh, and also, don't forget to use your screamer pots. They are extremely useful, but when he goes underground, you can spam them back to back. Balahara does not get an immunity cooldown or anything like that, and you can just get a ton of free damage on him with the screamer pots. Let me know what you personally think of Balahara, and if you enjoyed fighting him. I know quite a few people didn't, and if that's the case, feel free to tell me why in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe with notifications turned on. Peace out and happy hunting.